July 30th, 1944. Twilight seeps over the bocage of Normandy, shadows stretching across the hedgerows like dark fingers. The air smells of churned earth and diesel, sharp and metallic, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, terrified or angry, it's impossible to tell. British tanks rattle forward through narrow sunken lanes, the treads grinding over roots and rocks, the occasional splash of mud coating the driver's visors. Among them is Sergeant Tom, Gunner Whittaker, leaning against the iron beast he's been ordered to command, the Churchill MKIV. Gunner's men had joked at breakfast about the tank's ungainly shape. "Looks like a bathtub on tracks," one private said. "The armor is thick, yes, but slow, so slow that even a German Panther could overtake it on the road. The tracks are heavy, prone to slipping, and the engine coughs more than it roars." Whittaker swore under his breath, tapping the dashboard with a gloved hand. He could almost hear the mocking laughter of those who called it a coffin before he climbed in. The crew squints through the periscopes, trying to pierce the dusky green of Normandy's countryside. Hedgerow tunnels twist unpredictably, breaking the line of sight, and the muffled thuds of artillery somewhere behind the front line thrum like the heartbeat of the land itself. Whittaker feels it in his chest, each tank hull vibrating with the echo of distant shells. You can almost feel the cold sweat running down his neck, even through the helmet. This machine, these treads, this steel coffin could either save them or bury them. Ahead, a narrow rise cuts across the horizon, the kind of incline that German commanders had believed impassable. A Panther lurks on the ridge, its commander confident that the hedgerows and rough terrain would trap any British armor. Whittaker's gunner, young and jittery, mutters, "They'll have us for breakfast if we try to climb that." Whittaker doesn't answer. There's no time for words now. The tank shudders as he eases forward, treads gnawing at the muddy incline. You can almost feel the iron groan under the strain, the way the suspension jerks with every rock and rut. For weeks, Churchill crews have suffered under ridicule. Officers complained about the lack of speed, tankers mocked the sluggish turret traverse and slow firing rate. "Coffin," some had whispered, "death trap." Yet here, in the gloom of the Normandy evening, that very slowness is a hidden advantage. Every inch the tank climbs, every hesitation of the German gunners adds to the growing tension. Whittaker's radio crackles to life. "Spearhead, Panther spotted at 9 o'clock, a voice says, tinny and urgent. The crew freezes, grips tightening. You can almost taste the fear in the cabin, thick and acrid. The young gunner swallows hard. Whittaker's hands are steady on the controls, though his jaw aches from clenching. "Steady," he says, voice low. "Let's see what this coffin can do." The tank climbs, slowly, painfully, but the tracks hold. Mud splashes like black rain. German shells whistle past, clipping the hedgerow. Sparks dance along the iron, the smell of scorched earth mixing with diesel. Whittaker peers through the periscope, calculating angles, measuring distance. The Panther opens fire, but the Churchill's frontal armor, so heavily criticized, absorbs the rounds, deflecting them like arrows off a stone wall. The crew begins to whisper prayers. The tank groans. Whittaker feels the thrill of disbelief rising. This clunky, mocked machine, this so-called coffin, is proving the Germans wrong with every inch. But the ridge isn't the end. Beyond it lies a narrow gap lined with enemy positions, machine guns bristling, ready to tear through soft metal. Whittaker's eyes narrow. They have no choice but to push forward. And then, as the tank crests the rise, the unexpected happens. The German commander inside the Panther hesitates, perhaps stunned, perhaps questioning reality. The Churchill has climbed where no one thought it could. Whittaker feels the vibration of the engine as he presses forward, and a grim smile touches his lips. This is no coffin, not tonight. But the danger isn't over. Beyond the hedgerows, hidden and waiting, is a force that will test every ounce of the tank's armor, every second of the crew's courage. Whittaker knows it, and you, watching from the mud and steel, can feel the tension spike, the moment teetering on a knife's edge. Mini cliffhanger, the Churchill has proven it can climb the ridge, but a hidden German ambush waits just beyond the next hedgerow. What the crew doesn't see could end everything in seconds. The Churchill lurches forward, nose dipping as it clears the crest. For a split second, the world opens up. Beyond the ridge lies a shallow valley, boxed in by hedgerows so thick they look like walls grown by nature itself. Smoke hangs low, turning the last of the daylight into a dirty orange haze. Sergeant Whittaker squints through the periscope, heart hammering. This is kill country. Every British tanker in Normandy knows it. Then the first machine gun opens up. The sound slams into the hull like a fistful of gravel. Tracers stitch the air, red lines snapping past the vision ports. The radio erupts with overlapping shouts, units calling contact, commands half drowned by static. Whittaker raises a hand instinctively, as if his crew can see it. "Hold steady," he says, eyes out. You can almost feel the claustrophobia inside the tank now. 5 men sealed in steel, every noise amplified. The engine roars behind them, the smell of hot oil and cordite thick enough to choke on. The gunner swings the turret, slow, agonizingly slow. This is what they had mocked, the Churchill's sluggish response. In another tank, maybe they'd already be firing. A crack like thunder, the hull shudders violently. "Hit," someone yells. Whittaker's stomach drops, but then nothing, no penetration, no fire, just a ringing impact and a dent where the shell struck the frontal plate. The armor holds. A German 75 round, direct. Whittaker exhales for the first time in seconds. The driver laughs, sharp and hysterical. "That all you've got?" Another shell slams into the glacis, sparks spraying like fireworks. The Churchill absorbs it, the thick armor doing exactly what it was built to do. Suddenly, the jokes stop. The coffin isn't cracking, it's standing. Whittaker snaps orders. "Target the hedgerow, 200 yards, fire." The Churchill's main gun answers with a deep, concussive boom. The recoil punches through the hull, rattling teeth. Dirt and leaves explode outward as the shell chews through the German position. The machine gun fire stutters, then dies. But the ambush isn't finished. To the left, concealed in the shadows, a Panther shifts position. Its commander had not expected this. British armor wasn't supposed to be here, not climbing ridges, not shrugging off direct hits. The Panther fires again, aiming for the Churchill's side. The shell screams past, clipping the track guard. Whittaker feels the tank yaw slightly. The driver curses, fighting the controls. Mud sprays as the tracks grind and claw, refusing to give up their grip. That wide track design, mocked for its weight, its inefficiency, is now keeping them alive. "You see that?" the loader mutters, awe creeping into his voice. Whittaker nods, though no one can see him. He feels it too. This machine isn't fast, it isn't elegant, but it is relentless. Around them, other Churchills push forward, emerging from the hedgerows like iron beasts. German infantry scatter, stunned. The terrain that was supposed to protect them, these tangled walls of earth and root, is working against them now. The Churchills climb, crawl, and crush their way through gaps Panthers can't navigate without exposing their flanks. In a nearby command post, a German officer stares through binoculars, disbelief etched across his face. "These aren't Shermans. These tanks are wrong, too tall, too slow, and yet unstoppable." Back inside Whittaker's tank, the gunner lines up the Panther. The turret creaks, inch by inch. The Panther fires again, the shot ricocheting off the Churchill's armor with a scream of metal. Whittaker barks the order. "Fire!" The shell slams into the Panther's side armor, not a kill, but enough. Smoke pours from the engine deck. The German tank jerks, turret slewing wildly. Its crew bails out, scrambling for cover. For a heartbeat, there's silence. Then cheering erupts over the radio. Not polished, not triumphant, raw, almost shocked. Men who had expected to die in these tanks are realizing something profound. The Churchill wasn't built to race Panthers across open fields. It was built for this. The climb, the mud, the hedgerows, the punishment. Whittaker wipes sweat from his eyes, hands shaking now that the adrenaline is fading. He looks around the interior, scarred and dented, but intact. He thinks of all the times he cursed this tank, all the nights he wondered if climbing inside meant climbing into his grave. Outside, British infantry move up behind the armor, using the Churchills as moving cover. The advance continues, pushing deeper into territory German planners had written off as secure. But as Whittaker knows all too well, the enemy adapts quickly. Somewhere ahead, German commanders are already issuing new orders. Heavier guns, better angles, a determination to stop these slow, climbing monsters before they tear the line apart. And waiting beyond the next village is something far more dangerous than an ambush in a hedgerow. Mini cliffhanger: the Churchills have shattered the German defensive line, but word is spreading fast, and German heavy armor is moving to intercept them under cover of darkness. Night falls hard in Normandy. By 2300 hours, the sky is sealed shut with cloud, moonlight swallowed whole. The countryside disappears into shadow, broken only by the dull glow of burning vehicles and the occasional flash of artillery on the horizon. The Churchills halt briefly beneath the hedgerows, engines idling low, heat shimmering off their armor. Men light cigarettes with shaking hands, the flames cupped and quickly extinguished. Sergeant Whittaker leans forward in his seat, listening. The battlefield sounds different at night. Fewer shouts, more engines. You can hear danger moving before you ever see it. The radio crackles again. This time the voice is tight, controlled, afraid. Enemy armor advancing from the south. Markings suggest Panthers, possibly Tigers. Whittaker closes his eyes for half a second. Tigers, the word carries weight, a reputation, thick armor, a gun that kills at range, the kind of tank that makes crews pray their shells don't bounce. Inside the Churchill, the men exchange glances in the dim red light. No one jokes now. The earlier disbelief has hardened into something else, resolve mixed with dread. The Churchill can take punishment, yes, but against a Tiger, frontal armor alone may not be enough. Whittaker keys the radio. All units button up, we hold this ground. The tanks grind into position, noses angled toward the narrow lanes the German armor must use. That's the trick. That's the gamble. Panthers and Tigers need room, space to maneuver, space Normandy refuses to give them. Somewhere out there, German commanders are wrestling with an impossible report. British tanks are advancing through terrain labeled impassable. They are absorbing direct hits. They are still moving. Major Heinz Müller, commanding a Panther company, stares at his map under a flickering lantern. The lines don't make sense. He taps the paper with a gloved finger. They should not be here, he mutters. His adjutant says nothing. There is nothing to say. The first German tank emerges from the darkness at 20 hours. Whittaker sees it as a darker shape against blackness, the faint clatter of tracks echoing through the hedgerow corridor. His gunner holds his breath. The range is close, too close for comfort, if the Tiger fires first. Wait, Whittaker whispers, wait. The German tank rolls forward, unaware it is being watched from less than 100 yards. Its long barrel swings, searching for targets that should have been farther back, safer. Fire! The Churchill's gun erupts, the flash briefly turning night into day. The shell slams into the Tiger's track assembly. Metal screams. The massive tank lurches, immobilized. Another Churchill fires, then another. The hedgerows erupt with muzzle flashes. The German column halts in confusion, shells exploding harmlessly into earth banks or slamming against armor too thick to penetrate cleanly. But penetration isn't the goal. Stopping them is. British gunners hammer tracks, optics, turret rings. They blind, they cripple, they trap. Inside Whittaker's tank, the loader works like a machine, sweat pouring down his face as round after round is slammed home. The gunner's voice is hoarse, calling targets. The driver keeps the hull angled, presenting the thickest armor, trusting the tank with his life. A Panther fires at near point-blank range. The shell hits the Churchill's front plate and detonates, the shockwave ringing through the hull like a church bell struck by God himself. For a moment, Whittaker thinks he's dead. Then he's still breathing. The armor holds. Outside, German infantry retreat, shouting orders that dissolve into panic. This was supposed to be a decisive counterattack. Instead, they've driven into a steel trap built from tanks they dismissed as obsolete. Major Müller watches one of his Panthers burn, its crew scrambling out, faces lit by flames. He lowers his binoculars slowly. His mouth is dry. They built them for this, he realizes. Not speed, not elegance. Endurance. By 300 hours, the German advance is stalled. Some tanks are abandoned. Others pull back under cover of darkness, their crews shaken. British units consolidate the ground, Churchill's parked like immovable sentinels along the lanes. Whittaker finally allows himself to slump back in his seat. His hands are numb, his ears ring. The tank smells of hot metal and sweat and fear, but it is alive. They are alive. As dawn begins to bleed into the sky, pale and uncertain, Whittaker climbs halfway out of the hatch. He looks over the battlefield, disabled German armor, smoldering hedgerows, British infantry moving forward again. The coffin has become a fortress. But this night is only one piece of something larger. Far beyond this valley, German High Command is beginning to understand what this means, not just for Normandy, but for the entire Western Front. And that realization will come with consequences. Mini cliffhanger: as dawn breaks, German commanders prepare a new response, one that will test whether the Churchill's moment of triumph can survive the full weight of German doctrine. July 31st, 1944, 5:45 hours. The fog lies thick over Normandy, clinging to the hedgerows and low ground like a living thing. Visibility is barely 50 yards. Engines rumble softly as British armor prepares to move again, silhouettes barely visible through the grey. Sergeant Whittaker wipes condensation from his periscope and leans in, eyes narrowed. This fog is a gift. German doctrine demands distance, long sightlines, clean fields of fire, room to maneuver and kill from range. Normandy offers none of that, and the Churchill, derided in training fields and mocked in mess halls, has been waiting for this exact environment since the day it rolled off the production line. Orders come down the net. Operation Bluecoat is pressing forward. The Churchills move. Not fast, not dramatically. They simply advance, crushing brush, climbing slopes, nosing through gaps too tight for Panthers to exploit without exposing themselves. The wide tracks grip wet earth where narrower ones slip. The thick frontal armor absorbs punishment meant to stop lighter tanks cold. The slow speed, once a liability, forces careful, deliberate movement. No reckless charges, no overextension. Whittaker watches German positions dissolve under steady pressure. Anti-tank guns fire once, maybe twice, before being smothered by infantry or blasted by HE rounds. Crews that once laughed at the Churchill's silhouette now scramble to reposition, only to find their guns cannot depress far enough to hit the tank's angled front. A British infantry lieutenant runs alongside Whittaker's tank, slapping the hull and shouting something lost to the engine noise. His face is smeared with dirt, eyes wide with exhilaration. The tanks are doing exactly what they were supposed to do, what nothing else in the Allied arsenal can do here. Break the terrain. Inside German headquarters, confusion turns into grim calculation. Reports pile up. British tanks advancing through woods, scaling slopes, surviving hits that should have destroyed them. The map no longer reflects reality. German officers argue over whether the tanks are new models, modified armor, or simply being used in ways they hadn't anticipated. One staff officer says it out loud, barely above a whisper. "We planned for speed, they planned for survival." The truth settles like a weight. Back at the front, Whittaker's Churchill takes another hit, this one from a concealed 88. The impact is brutal. The tank jolts, men thrown against the steel interior. Alarms scream, the engine stutters. For a terrifying moment, it feels like the coffin has finally claimed them. Engine still running, the driver yells. Whittaker exhales and forces himself upright. Then we are still in the fight. The Churchill limps forward, scarred but operational. Another tank pulls alongside, covering it. This is the quiet strength of the design, redundancy, armor layered not just in steel but in philosophy. If one tank falters, another takes its place. By mid-morning, British forces secure key high ground German planners had written off as safe. Panthers attempt counterattacks but are forced into choke points where their advantages evaporate. Tigers loom, fire, then withdraw rather than risk immobilization. For the first time since Normandy began, German armor is reacting instead of dictating. Whittaker watches as engineers and infantry stream past, exploiting the breach. He realizes something then, not with joy, but with a heavy sense of inevitability. This isn't just a successful attack. It's a lesson. The Churchill was never meant to win duels in open fields. It was meant to keep moving when everything else stopped, to go where others couldn't, to endure. German commanders see it now too late. The tank they dismissed as obsolete has found its moment, and moments in war, once seized, rarely return. As the fog lifts, revealing the scarred countryside and the wreckage of failed defenses, Whittaker rests his helmet against the cold steel of the hatch. He thinks of the jokes, the doubts, the word coffin whispered in half-lit tents. He almost laughs. But the battle isn't finished. Not here, not anywhere. The Churchill's reputation has changed in a single night, but reputations mean nothing if the tank can't survive what comes next. And what comes next will demand everything it has left. Mini cliffhanger, with the breach made and German doctrine exposed, the Churchills are ordered deeper into enemy territory, toward a test that will decide whether their moment was luck or destiny. August 1st, 1944, early evening. The sun hangs low over Normandy, swollen and red, its light filtering through smoke and dust like it's passing through dirty glass. Shadows stretch long across the broken countryside. What was once farmland is now a scar, a maze of churned soil, snapped trees, and burned-out vehicles frozen mid-motion, as if the land itself was caught trying to escape. The Churchills are still here. They sit where they fought, where they were hit, where they refused to stop. Some are angled awkwardly in shell holes, their tracks half submerged in mud and water. Others bear scars that tell stories all on their own, long gouges where shells slid off, impact marks ringed with scorched paint, armor plates warped but unbroken. A few tanks are silent now, abandoned not because they failed, but because the fight moved on without them. Sergeant Tom Whittaker's Churchill idles near a shattered orchard, apple trees splintered into jagged poles. The engine coughs, settles, coughs again. The smell inside the tank is familiar now, oil, sweat, hot metal, cordite. It no longer smells like fear. Whittaker stands half out of the hatch, helmet loose, chin strap undone. His eyes follow British infantry moving forward in loose columns, rifles slung, posture relaxed in a way that would have been unthinkable days earlier. They walk beside the tanks now, not behind them. They trust the armor. That trust didn't exist before. Just days ago, infantrymen avoided the Churchills, half convinced they would draw fire and die spectacularly. Now they slap the hulls as they pass, tapping the steel like it's lucky. Some even grin. Momentum has a sound. It's the steady grind of tracks moving forward instead of stopping. It's the absence of frantic radio calls. It's the quiet confidence of men who feel the ground shifting beneath their feet, this time in their favor. Whittaker knows better than to call it victory. He's been in uniform too long. Victory announces itself loudly and vanishes just as fast. What he's witnessing is something subtler. A change in posture. A change in belief. Inside the Churchill, the crew moves differently now. The loader doesn't rush, he works with practiced economy. The gunner wipes dust from the optics with care instead of panic. The driver listens to the engine like a physician, adjusting throttle and gear gently, coaxing life instead of demanding it. They trust the machine. And more importantly, the machine has earned it. Across the battlefield, the evidence piles up. German anti-tank guns abandoned after firing once or twice, crews realizing too late that their angles are wrong. Panthers forced into narrow lanes where turning exposes their sides. Tigers withdrawing rather than risking immobilization in ground they were never meant to cross. German reports begin to reflect a tone that has been absent since the war began. Uncertainty. One report notes that British heavy tanks continue advancing despite sustained fire. Another describes terrain, previously assessed as unsuitable, now being crossed, with alarming consistency. A staff officer writes, almost incredulously, that British armor appears indifferent to conditions. That word, indifferent, cuts deeper than any insult. German doctrine is built on control, on calculated dominance, on the belief that superior machines, used correctly, dictate the battlefield. But doctrine is brittle. It assumes the battlefield will behave. Normandy refuses. And the Churchill thrives precisely because it does not demand cooperation from the terrain. It grinds, it climbs, it absorbs punishment and keeps moving, denying the enemy the satisfaction of decisive destruction. Whittaker receives new orders shortly before dusk. Advance again. Deeper. Past the line German planners believed would hold, past the ridges marked as natural barriers, past the assumptions that shaped months of defensive planning. The crew exchanges looks. No one smiles. They simply nod. They have learned something over the last 48 hours. This tank will not save them from fear. It will not make the war clean or easy, but it will give them time. And time, in combat, is everything. The Churchill lurches forward once more. As it moves, Whittaker rests his gloved hand against the interior armor. The steel is warm beneath his palm, alive with vibration. He thinks about the men who designed it years earlier, engineers criticized for being overly cautious, for prioritizing protection over speed. Men told their tank was outdated before it ever saw combat. They built it for lessons learned in blood, lessons no one wanted to hear anymore. But wars have a way of resurrecting old truths. The Churchill was never meant to chase. It was meant to survive, to keep going when others stopped. And now, because of that philosophy, British forces are advancing where German doctrine breaks down. Reserves are being pulled from elsewhere. Counterattacks are delayed, blunted, cancelled. The American breakout to the west accelerates as pressure mounts across the front. Not because of brilliance, because of endurance. Operation Bluecoat achieves its purpose not with spectacle, but with persistence. The Germans are forced to respond again and again, spending strength they cannot replace, reacting to a problem they never expected to face. By nightfall, Whittaker's tank halts on a low rise overlooking another stretch of battered countryside. The crew shuts down the engine. Silence settles, broken only by distant artillery and the ticking of cooling metal. Whittaker sits on the hull, boots dangling, watching the sky darken. He thinks about the word coffin, about how it felt the first time he climbed inside this machine, convinced he was sealing his fate, about the laughter, the bitterness, the belief that he was betting his life on a mistake made by men far from the front. Now, surrounded by proof burned into the land itself, the thought feels hollow. The Churchill was never glamorous. It never inspired awe. It inspired survival. Years from now, history will remember faster tanks, deadlier guns, cleaner breakthroughs. Maps will be drawn with arrows and dates, victories summarized in paragraphs. But the men who fought inside these machines will remember something else. The climb. The hits that didn't kill them. The moment disbelief turned into trust. The moment a coffin became a cornerstone. Because sometimes wars are not decided by the best machine. They are decided by the one that keeps going when everything else fails.